Hello everyone. I know you watched this video to accompany you to sleep. So if you like this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, don't forget to tell me where you are from and what time you watched this video. Let's jump straight into the story. Story 1. In 2019, 22-year-old college student Tessa Moreno vanished from her Manhattan apartment without leaving a trace. Her keys still on the counter, dinner half-eaten, and her phone recording 6 minutes of whispers through the wall just moments before her disappearance. The case went cold until a new tenant in the same unit began hearing the same whispers and discovered a secret crawl space that led to a room not listed on any blueprint. What investigators uncovered inside would reveal a decades-old cult hiding in plain sight, one that never needed a compound. They just needed you to live next door. June 14th, 2019, 8:12 p.m., New York City. Tessa Moreno had just finished making her favorite comfort meal, lemon garlic pasta with shrimp. She plated it neatly, poured a glass of wine, and sent a quick photo to her best friend. Dinner, finally. No more takeout. Being an adult is exhausting. She included a laughing emoji and hit send. That was the last time anyone would hear from her. The apartment Tessa lived in a small but tidy one-bedroom unit in Manhattan's East Village. Apartment 6B. Rent-controlled. A dream come true for a graduate student working part-time at a publishing house. The building was old, built in 1904. Crown molding, radiators, floorboards that creaked at every step. Most of the tenants were long-timers. Artists, musicians, aging bohemians. Tessa had only moved in 3 months ago, and she loved it. Until the whispers started. Days before. According to her friend Harper, Tessa had been growing paranoid. She kept texting me at weird hours, Harper later told investigators. Stuff like, "Do you hear them too?" Or, "They're behind the walls again." I thought she was just stressed. In her final week, Tessa sent Harper 13 voice messages. Only 3 were coherent. The rest? Just her breathing and what sounded like distant murmurs. She insisted the sounds came from her bedroom wall near the radiator. Her super told her it was just old pipes, heat rattling through. But Tessa wasn't convinced. The phone recording. On the night of her disappearance, Tessa left her phone recording. Detectives would find it the next morning, screened down on the carpet, still warm. The file was 6 minutes and 13 seconds long. The first minute, silence. The second, soft scraping. The third, whispers, too low to make out. At 4:22, a male voice, faint, speaking from beyond the wall. She hears. That's enough. Then footsteps. A thud. Tessa gasping. And finally, a dragging sound. Then silence. Discovery, Tessa's landlord, Arthur Kell, let himself in around noon the next day. She'd missed 2 deliveries. Her boss couldn't reach her. Harper had been texting nonstop with no reply. The apartment was eerily calm. Food still on the table, untouched. Her shoes by the door. Purse hanging from a hook. No forced entry. No sign of struggle. Only her phone, still recording, propped against the baseboard near the wall she'd complained about. NYPD involvement detectives Jennifer Tran and Isaiah Brooks took the case. The initial report classified it as a non-violent missing persons case. But then came the audio. After listening to the file, Detective Tran replayed the segment at 4:22 again and again. She looked up, visibly unsettled. That voice isn't in the apartment, she whispered. It's inside the wall. Blueprints and dead ends. Tran requested the building's blueprints. But the city's records were a mess. Renovations, undocumented additions, fire damage from the 70s. Still, a partial map revealed something odd. Units 6A, 6B, 6C shared one wall. But behind Tessa's bedroom, between her unit and the next, was a strangely wide column. Too wide for ductwork, too narrow for stairs. When asked, the landlord shrugged. This building's 100 years old. Could be bricked-off chimney, plumbing shaft, old elevator. Who knows? Tran didn't buy it. Interview with neighbors offered little. Most said they hadn't heard anything unusual. Except for one. Mr. Harold Weems, 72, in 6C. The girl? The one next to me, he muttered, eyes darting. She was listening too much. That's when they notice you. You have to pretend you don't hear. Otherwise, they come through. When pressed, he refused to elaborate. Tran left her card. He threw it in the trash. The crawl space 3 days later, the building's handyman was sent to check the plumbing behind 6B's radiator. He removed the panel and froze. Behind it wasn't a pipe. It was an opening. A tight crawl space, 4 feet high, lined with fresh scratch marks. At the far end, a small wooden door, unpainted, no handle. Detective Brooks crawled in with a flashlight. He reached the door, braced his hand against the floor, and fell through. The hidden room Brooks landed in a chamber 6 feet wide and 7 feet deep. No light, no ventilation, just one thing inside. A wooden chair, nailed to the center of the floor, stained dark. On the walls, hundreds of markings, tally lines, etchings, names, most unreadable. But one stood out, carved over and over, "Give quiet." Then, behind him, a sound. From inside the wall, software chanted. In, outside, in, out. He turned. No one was there. A familiar name. When the detectives presented their findings to the department, something odd happened. An officer in missing persons, Senior Detective Anya Letts, overheard the word crawl space. She interrupted the meeting. Where was this again? East Village, Tran said. Apartment 6B. Letts went pale. That's not the first 6B. She pulled up an old case file. 1998. A girl named Lorraine Halpern had vanished. From 6B, different building, same number. She too had reported hearing whispers from the wall. The last thing she told her mother, "They want me to sit still and listen." A pattern begins. Tran and Brooks began digging, more cases, across decades, across cities, all missing girls, all from apartments labeled 6B. Each had reported strange noises, murmurs through walls, a growing obsession with silence, and every disappearance was followed by the same phrase found scrawled somewhere in the room. Give quiet. Tessa's case was no longer just about one missing girl. It was part of something older, deliberate, and watching. June 18th, 2019, NYPD Archives. Detective Jennifer Tran sifted through the stack of tenant records for apartment 6B. Most dated back less than a decade. The paper trail for the East Village building had significant gaps. Missing leases, unfiled evictions, handwritten rental agreements. But she finally found something solid, a lease from 2013. The name on the document read, Rachel Pendry. No forwarding address, no phone number, just a final note in the building's maintenance ledger. Moved out suddenly. Left furniture and unpaid rent. Unit required deep cleaning. No damage, but walls repainted. Tran squinted. Why repaint if there was no damage? Rachel Pendry tracking. Rachel took time. She'd left New York 6 years ago, changed states, changed jobs twice. But Tran eventually found her in Connecticut, living under a hyphenated last name and working as a speech therapist. When Tran showed up on her doorstep, Rachel's reaction wasn't confusion. It was recognition. 6B? Rachel asked, before Tran could even speak. Is it back? The journal inside her suburban living room, Rachel unlocked a fireproof safe. Inside was a weathered composition notebook. Its cover had a sticker half torn off. Inside, the pages were filled with obsessive entries, each dated, each more erratic. May 3rd, 2013. There's someone breathing through the vent at night. May 7. They say my name now, only when I sleep. I've started sleeping in the tub. May 12. They asked me to give quiet. I pretended not to hear. Now my mirror fogs up with messages. May 19. I watched my reflection move before I did. The final entry, scrawled diagonally across the last page. If you don't give quiet, they take it. The chair is ready. What Rachel saw. Rachel spoke carefully, almost like reciting a rehearsed testimony. I wasn't mentally ill, she said. Every shrink I saw said I was stable, but I know what I saw, what I felt. They didn't want noise. They wanted obedience, stillness, reverence. I would scream and they'd whisper louder. I wore earplugs and they sang. They were inside the walls. And I don't mean metaphorically. She described a night in late May when she blacked out in her bathroom and woke up in a crawl space she didn't know existed, sitting on a chair, in total silence. I was there for hours, but I never left my apartment. Not physically, it was like they folded me inside it. Tran asked why she hadn't gone to the police. Rachel looked down. Because the chair let me go. It meant I passed. Cult of silence. Back at the precinct, Brooks dug deeper into the name Rachel Pendry. Something about the phrase, "give quiet," nagged at him. He found it in an obscure online archive for declassified FBI religious investigations. In 1980, federal agents had infiltrated a spiritual group in upstate New York. Its name, the Order of Stillness. Members practiced silence as a divine sacrament. They believed speaking separated the soul from truth, and that enlightenment came through absolute quiet. The report noted, multiple followers claimed to have heard voices after weeks of silence. Several had sealed themselves inside walls of abandoned buildings, voluntarily. One had carved "give quiet" into his chest before dying of exposure in a cellar. The cult disbanded after the leader, Father Eli Archer, disappeared, presumed dead. But rumors persisted for decades about whispers through drywall and a presence that rewards obedience with invisibility. Building history. Tran and Brooks returned to 6B with new eyes. They inspected the wall behind Tessa's radiator again. This time, Brooks noticed something different. The wall had been replastered multiple times, layers over layers. They broke through it carefully. Behind the plaster, buried within the brick, a wooden plaque, barely larger than a book cover. On it, a carved circle, a triangle inside, and beneath it, Initiate 6B. Brooks looked at Tran. This wasn't a coincidence. The apartment number isn't random. It's a designation. The man with no tongue. The break in the case came from an unexpected place. An ER nurse in Brooklyn called the tip line. A man had stumbled in, naked, dehydrated, disoriented. No ID, no injuries except one. His tongue had been surgically removed. The only thing he had was a slip of paper in his hand, clutched so tightly they had to cut it out. It read, "Return to 6B, I gave quiet." Interview through writing, doctors determined the man could write, and over the next 48 hours, he scribbled a fragmented account. Taken in 2006. Lived in a room with no sound. No names. No mirrors. The wall people listen. If you scream, they listen harder. Chair teaches you how to be still. When you're ready, you don't need a name. I passed. They let me out. He signed the paper with a symbol, a triangle inside a circle. The pattern deepens. Brooks built a spreadsheet. Cases, names, addresses. They had Lorraine Halpern, disappeared 1998, Apt 6B, Philadelphia. Tessa Moreno, disappeared 2019. Apt 6B, NYC Rachel Pendry, fled 2013. Apt 6B, NYC Jared Venz, tongue removed, 2006. Apt 6B, Detroit, Mia Castillo. Last seen entering Apt 6B, Denver, 2002. All cases were in cities with buildings at least 70 years old. All units designated 6B, and in every case, whispers, drawings of a chair. The phrase, "give quiet." Tran didn't want to believe it, but the map didn't lie. Something, or someone, was using apartment 6BS as conduits, recruitment chambers, and they weren't done. June 22, 2019, 2:13 a.m., East Village, NYC Detective Isaiah Brooks crouched inside the narrow crawlspace behind 6B for the second time. This time, he wasn't alone. Behind him, Detective Tran held a portable floodlight and recorder. They had a warrant, cameras, body armor, and 2 officers waiting in the hallway above. What they didn't have was any idea what lay past the wooden door Brooks fell through days earlier. Tonight, they planned to open it, not fall through it. The door opens. Brooks pressed his hand against the center of the wooden door. This time it gave way, not with a creak or resistance. It swung inward on invisible hinges, revealing darkness so complete their flashlights seemed to dim. Beyond it, a corridor stretched for 30 feet. Walls of aged stone, damp air. No signs of wiring, pipes, or insulation. This was not part of the apartment. This was something older. The listening room. At the end of the corridor, they found it. A room no bigger than a walk-in closet. Walls covered in hand-drawn spirals and etchings of a figure with no face. At the center, a tall-backed wooden chair, same as described in every case file. Stained, carved with symbols. Chains lay on the floor, rusted and long unused. Behind the chair, a slit in the wall. A horizontal hole wide as a face, like a confessional slot. On the wall above it, carved words. "Give quiet, receive sight." Tran recorded everything. This was a chamber for indoctrination, she whispered. Or punishment. Or both, Brooks replied. Hidden network. They expected the room to be a dead end, but on the opposite wall, behind a rotted bookshelf, they discovered a tunnel leading downward. It wasn't natural. Stonework, lined, reinforced, and beyond it, more interconnected hallways. They descended for over 20 minutes, until they reached a narrow passage that branched in 2 directions. Tran marked one path with chalk. They followed the left. The graffiti archive. The first chamber they entered had walls completely covered in writing. Not recent graffiti, layered messages dating back decades. "I gave quiet. I was heard. They see with ears. The chair brings stillness. Stillness brings him. I failed. Don't whisper back." In the corner, a metal box nailed to the floor. Inside, dozens of old cassette tapes labeled only by apartment numbers and dates. 6B, 3C, 4A, spread across cities. Tran pocketed the tapes. She recognized one label, 6B, Philly, Lorraine Halpern, 1998. The presence. As they moved deeper, their radios stopped working. Tran's flashlight flickered. She heard something, barely perceptible. A hum, then a whisper. "You shouldn't hear this." She spun around. No one there. Brooks was ahead, unaware. They continued until they reached a fork. Here, the tunnel expanded into arched stonework like an old subway station. Tran checked her phone's GPS. They were under 9th Street, 5 blocks from the original apartment. "This is a damn network," she said. "A system. They're beneath the entire block." The shrine. At the end of the next hall, they found what they would later refer to as the shrine. A round room, candlelit, somehow still flickering, with 6 chairs forming a circle. In the center, a crude sculpture made of broken mirrors and speaker parts, shaped like a human figure with no mouth. On the floor beneath it, dozens of tongues preserved in jars, labeled with dates. Some were recent. One was marked June 15th, 2019. T. Moreno Tran backed away. Brooks stared at the sculpture. "This isn't just silence," he said. "It's sacrifice. They don't want peace. They want devotion." The tunnel collapsed. As Tran lifted her radio to call out, the walls began to tremble. Dust rained from above. A low groan, like the building above them was shifting. Then the left wall collapsed inward, blocking the path they came from. They ran down the opposite hall, barely escaping falling debris. The tunnel behind them sealed in total darkness. "They're collapsing it," Tran shouted. "They know we're here. We have to go forward." The escape. After what felt like another mile, they emerged in a forgotten service tunnel near an old boiler room in a completely different building, an abandoned prep school on 2nd Avenue. When they pushed open the door, sunlight blinded them. They had been underground for nearly 5 hours. Tran collapsed on the pavement. Brooks made the call. The cover-up, the NYPD sealed the entrance. The city claimed the tunnel was part of an outdated utility system from the 1900s. "Nothing criminal," the official statement read. "No arrests, no mention of Tessa, no mention of the jars. But someone leaked photos." Reddit exploded. TikTok conspiracy theorists began using the hashtag #GiveQuiet. The cult in apartment 6B had gone viral, and someone out there wasn't happy about it. The tape that night. Tran played one of the tapes recovered from the archive. Label: Lorraine Halpern, 6B, 1998. It was static at first, then a girl's voice. "I tried not to talk. They promised if I stayed quiet long enough, I'd become like them. And they'd let me live in the walls forever. I'm not scared anymore. I'm almost ready." Then silence, then a click, then one last whisper. "One more, and we'll have enough." The 6Bs are almost full. July 4th, 2019, Chicago, Illinois. It had been 3 weeks since the collapse of the New York tunnels and the viral spread of the hashtag #GiveQuiet phenomenon. Thousands of amateur sleuths, Reddit investigators, and YouTube vloggers had jumped on the mystery. But in the real world, the leads dried up, until one surfaced. In Chicago, another girl went missing, from an apartment labeled 6B, Camille Wells, 26 years old. Bartender, artist. Recently moved into an affordable unit in a refurbished historic building in the city's uptown neighborhood. She posted frequently on Instagram. Artwork, latte selfies, her cat, Mozart. Her final post on July 2nd showed her in her new bedroom, smiling with a caption: "Finally got rid of the noise in my life. Peace is underrated." New start. 6B Honch. Silence, please. Investigators wouldn't know how eerie that post was until they saw the DMs she sent hours later. "Do you ever feel like walls remember things? I keep hearing my own voice, but I'm not speaking. They said they're almost ready." The discovery. 2 days after Camille's last post, her landlord entered the apartment to deliver her security deposit contract. Camille was gone. No signs of struggle, no signs of leaving. Her phone was still on the charger. Mozart the cat had starved to death. And on the bathroom mirror, "You gave quiet." Written in reverse with something dark and sticky, possibly blood. Tran and Brooks fly out. When Tran and Brooks were alerted to the case, they knew immediately. Another 6B, another missing woman. Same pattern. They flew to Chicago within 12 hours, contacting local PD and asking to inspect the apartment firsthand. Detective Ruiz, skeptical but cooperative, gave them the go-ahead. "You think this is connected to the tunnels in New York?" he asked. Brooks nodded grimly. "We think this is bigger than tunnels." Chicago's 6B Camille's apartment was nearly identical to Tessa's. Turn-of-the-century architecture, plaster walls, creaky floors. But here, the walls were thicker, and when Tran knocked on the bedroom wall, she heard it. A soft echo, like tapping a coffin. Brooks found a vent grill painted shut. He pried it open. Inside was a space just wide enough to crawl through. This time the walls were clean. No markings, just a chair, tucked into the corner, and taped beneath it, a Polaroid. The Polaroid. The photo was blurred but unmistakable. A woman, Camille, was sitting in the chair, hands in her lap, smiling faintly. Behind her, someone loomed, their face obscured by darkness, but their outline was terrifying. No eyes, no mouth, just skin. On the back of the photo, she passed. We keep her. Digging deeper back in New York, Tran contacted a tech archivist named Owen Teller, a conspiracy researcher who had compiled a database of every known 6B across the country. They met at a public park, Teller too paranoid to be seen near any structure with walls. He laid it out. There were 193 confirmed apartments labeled 6B in pre-1950s, buildings still standing. At least 49 of those had reported missing persons between 1970 and 2020. In every single case, the missing person had lived in 6B, and in over half of those, residents before them had filed noise complaints or complaints about whispers, echoes, or footsteps inside walls. It's not the same building, Teller said. It's the same blueprint. The apartment is just the seed. The ritual is the root. The ritual teller believed that each 6B acted as a node in a nationwide spiritual network, like a circuit or a cult's neural web. Each apartment housed the same process. The subject moves in. The subject begins to hear whispers. Whispers intensify, often mimicking the subject's voice. A chair is introduced or discovered. The subject passes or disappears. The whisperers don't abduct, Teller said. They invite. They groom you. They wear you down until you give yourself. Tran shook her head. You're saying it's spiritual? No, Teller said. I'm saying it's practiced. It's ritualistic silence, passed down, recreated over and over. A cult without a temple, just blueprints and patience. Reeves returns, back in New York. Retired Detective Reeves called Tran. He had been following the case in silence, laying low. But now, he'd found something buried in the NYPD's cold case files, a Itzerkilent Zazhet Venetus case. A woman named Darla June disappeared from her Brooklyn apartment. Apartment number? 6B. Her landlord at the time? Arthur Kell, the same man who now owned Tessa's building. Arthur Kell, Tran, and Brooks returned to Kell's property under a pretense of a building inspection. They found him in the boiler room. When asked about Darla June, his expression didn't change. Some people disappear, he said simply. That doesn't mean they're gone. Sometimes they move where it's quieter. Then he turned to Tran and whispered, You ever sat still long enough to hear what your guilt sounds like? She stepped back. Brooks reached for his badge, but Kell had vanished. The envelope later that day, a plain envelope, was delivered to NYPD headquarters. Inside, a single photograph, black and white, old, faded. It showed a group of 6 men and women, all standing in front of a row of brownstones. In front of one building, a visible number. 6B1 of the men in the photo, a young Arthur Kell. On the back of the photo, handwritten in ink, the first 6. They gave quiet. Now they guide it. The surrender. The next day, Camille's Instagram account suddenly reactivated. A new story was posted. A grainy video, no audio. It showed a room bathed in candlelight. Camille sat in a chair, calm, still, surrounded by 4 other chairs, each occupied by blurred, motionless figures. At the end of the video, Camille raised her eyes to the camera and smiled. Caption below, The walls are wide. We are waiting. Then it vanished. Her account deleted. Again. July 7th, 2019, New York City. The black and white photo had become their new obsession. 6 people, unknown location, no date. The only clues, an address number, 6B, and a face Detective Tran had already seen. Arthur Kell, younger, stronger, smiling. Who were the others? Why were they called the first 6? Reeves, back in the fold unofficially, suggested starting with property records. If 6B wasn't just a unit, but a symbol, then its origin might be buried in the buildings themselves. They focused on the one thing they could trace: the face of a man who had been managing properties with 6B units for almost 50 years. Wartime connections. Kell's early records showed a bizarre trajectory. Born in 1929, served in Korea, infantry, discharged in 1952 with high commendation. Then, nothing. A complete gap in public records until 1959, when he purchased an abandoned tenement building in the Bronx. The first in a long string of cheap, crumbling properties, each of them housing an apartment 6B. He wasn't just a landlord, Reeves muttered, studying the paperwork. He was building something, or preserving it, Tran added. Brooks nodded, highlighting a note in a 1962 city file. Next to Arthur Kell, owner, were 2 curious words: silent ministry. The silent ministry teller, the conspiracy archivist, came through again. Silent ministry was the original name of what became the Order of Stillness. The cult disbanded in the 80s. The ministry was active in the late 1950s, recruiting war veterans, widows, and lost people through classified ads promising peace, spiritual healing, and the restoration of purpose through stillness. It was founded by a man named Eli Archer, a charismatic World War II chaplain who believed the modern world had deafened people's souls. His manifesto read, "In silence, we remember our shape. In stillness, we return to our function." The world was not made for noise. It was made for listening. The birth of the network. According to archived FBI interviews, Archer taught that every apartment labeled 6B was part of a consecrated circuit. Each was a chamber of convergence, a place where souls could enter stillness and return to God by shedding their sound. Kell had been one of Archer's first disciples, and in 1958, according to an internal letter later uncovered, Archer selected 6 individuals, including Kell, to money plant stillness across America by acquiring properties, building hidden chambers, and identifying initiates who yearned to disappear. They became known within the cult as the First 6. The disappearance of Eli Archer vanished in 1970 under mysterious circumstances. Some believed he was murdered by former followers after rumors of abuse and coercion within the group. Others said he completed the final ritual, giving absolute quiet, which required more than silence. It required erasure. No records, no face, no voice. Total oblivion. But whispers said something darker, that Archer had become something more than a man, something that lived through the walls, and that the 6B network wasn't just built to remember him, it was built to sustain him. A visit to 6B, Detroit Tran and Brooks traveled to Detroit, where one of the oldest 6B disappearances had occurred in 2006. The building had long been condemned, but it still stood. Graffiti covered the walls, windows were broken, the air inside was damp and chemical. In the bedroom of the unit, carved deep into the plaster, I saw his mouth once. It was stitched shut, but I still heard him speak. Behind a wall panel, they found blueprints, not just of the building, but of others, dozens, all with 6B units circled in red, and in the margin, handwritten, "The root network breathes through us. We are not landlords. We are lungs." A new disappearance. Just as they returned to New York, news broke. Another woman had gone missing, but this time it wasn't a 6B, it was a 6C, a neighboring unit. The first time the pattern had shifted. Brooks stared at the report. "They're expanding," he said quietly, "or adapting." Tran responded, "Or maybe they've filled the seats in 6B. A hidden film reel Reeves tracked down a retired cult member in a nursing home outside Albany, a woman named Margaret Blaine, age 87. She agreed to speak, barely. She had little to say, but much to show. From her closet, she retrieved an 8mm film reel labeled The Listening Ritual, 1961. It took 3 days to digitize it. When it played, all 3 detectives sat in silence. Black and white footage, a candlelit room. A man sits in a chair. Behind him, 5 others. Each speaks only once. Then they cut their tongues out, then sit still. For the remainder of the 12-minute reel, no one moves. But in the final seconds, a 6th person enters. Eli Archer. He doesn't speak, doesn't gesture. He simply places his hand on the back of the chair, and the screen cuts to white. A terrifying possibility. That night, Brooks couldn't sleep. He sat in his kitchen listening. His fridge hummed, pipes rattled, the usual creaks. Then, at 3:12 a.m., he heard it. A whisper, coming from behind the wall. Just 2 words. "Almost ready?" He pressed his ear to the drywall. This time the voice wasn't faint. It was right there, on the other side. "We are always listening." July 10th, 2019. New York City. They called her a fluke, an outlier, a girl who disappeared from a 6B unit in 2011 and then, against every pattern, resurfaced 4 months later. No one believed her story. Not the NYPD, not the doctors, not even her parents. She didn't fight it. She didn't cry. She just kept repeating one thing: "The chair let me go." Her name was Naomi Klein, 18, when she vanished. A freshman at Pratt Institute. Talented, withdrawn, soft-spoken. Naomi had moved into a sublet at 6B on Clinton Avenue, Brooklyn. Within 2 weeks, she stopped attending classes. When her RA checked in, Naomi said everything was fine, that she was just learning to listen again. The disappearance. On October 22, 2011, Naomi's roommate came home to find the front door ajar. The apartment was in perfect condition except for the bedroom. Her bed was made. Her sketchbook was open on the desk, but every page was completely blacked out. At the center of the final page, a single word: quiet. The return exactly 124 days later, February 23, 2012. Naomi reappeared in a subway station in Midtown. She was barefoot, dressed in the same clothes she wore when she vanished. Clean, calm, not starved, and completely silent. Doctors assumed catatonia, psych trauma, but her vitals were perfect. Brain scans clean, no evidence of damage or abuse. Then, 2 days later, she spoke a single sentence: "They let me go because I heard what they really are." Finding Naomi, she vanished again in 2016. This time, deliberately. No trace, no trail. But thanks to Teller's obsessive records and Reeves' detective instincts, they found her. Living off-grid in a cabin in Vermont. No phone, no bank account, no digital footprint. They approached carefully. She didn't run. She simply looked at Tran and said, "You found another 6 billion, didn't you?" The interview, Naomi sat in front of the wood stove, wrapped in a wool blanket. She hadn't stopped staring at the fire since they arrived. "They don't just want silence," she said finally. "They want stillness of thought, of memory. They feed on noise, on resistance. But what they really desire, what draws them, is when you break and accept the void. It's not a cult. It's a process, a transformation." Tran asked her what they really were. Naomi's voice was steady. They're echoes. That's the best word I have. Echoes that learn to live in walls, where thoughts fade and voices bounce. Archer found a way to speak to them, to make them listen. And now they want to become more than echoes. The inside Naomi described the time inside as existing in a different plane. There was no time, no hunger, no sleep. Only a room, a chair, a pressure that built in your skull if you tried to think or speak. If you resisted, the pressure became pain. If you accepted it, the pain left, and you could hear everything, every breath in the building, every footstep above, conversations in apartments 3 floors away, even thoughts, not words, but intentions. They were teaching me to become like them, to listen without ego, to witness without identity. I left before the final step. Tran asked why they let her go. Naomi didn't answer at first. Then, because I understood them, but I didn't want to stay. And they couldn't bear to force someone who already knew. The warning before Tran and Brooks left, Naomi gave them a notebook. Inside were dozens of hand-drawn diagrams, floor plans, tunnel maps, crude sketches of chairs and shrines. At the back, a final page with a warning. The network is almost full. When all 6 Bs are awakened, they'll connect. And when they connect, there will be no outside. Collapse in Denver. On July 12th, a tenement building in Denver collapsed overnight. 6 residents were killed. The official cause: structural failure due to age. Unreported in the press. One of the units had been 6B, unmentioned in the report. Beneath the rubble, firefighters found a small stone chamber, intact, with a single chair. Inside, sitting upright, a smiling corpse, hands folded, eyes open, no tongue. The coroner couldn't determine a cause of death, but inside the mouth was a note wedged between molars. He speaks through silence now, and the walls are his lungs. Naomi's final message. That night, Tran received a voicemail from a blocked number. She answered, but no one spoke. Then came a familiar voice. Naomi's. Soft, breathy. They're almost ready. 1 more, maybe 2. And when the last chair is filled, he will walk. Then static, then silence. July 13th, 2019, NYPD headquarters, Manhattan. The map on the wall was now covered in red string. Dozens of thumbtacks marked the confirmed 6B sites. Photographs of missing tenants, ritual shrines, and fragments of underground tunnels dotted the board like a slowly tightening noose. And at the center of it all, one name kept reappearing. Arthur Kell. The only remaining member of the first 6 still alive. And now, seemingly gone. The missing piece. Tran flipped through Naomi's notebook again. There were floor plans, cryptic sketches, and code-like sequences of numbers. Brooks pointed at a page marked with symbols, 6 triangles in a circle. What if these aren't just markers? He said. What if they're coordinates? They checked each against existing 6B cases. Only 5 matched known locations. But the 6th coordinate, a match to Troy, New York, a city with no documented 6B disappearances. Tran ran the address. 51 Grant Avenue, a 4-story building, privately owned. Unit 6B currently vacant, but only for the past 3 weeks. The Troy unit, they drove upstate that night. The building was quiet, pre-war, unassuming. They knocked on the door. No answer. They broke in. And what they found inside 6B stopped them cold. The apartment was set perfectly clean. Candles in every corner. A chair in the center of the room. No bed, no fridge, no furniture. Just one thing on the wall. A map of all known 6B units across the U.S. with 5 marked in black ink. 1 remained blank. This one. And beneath it, in cursive, the last chair is ready. Surveillance revealed. Hidden beneath the chair, Brooks discovered a miniature hard drive attached to a wireless camera system. They plugged it into Tran's laptop. It had only recorded for 2 weeks, but the footage was harrowing. July 2nd, a man in a dark coat places the chair. July 3rd to 10th, the room sits undisturbed. July 11th, at 2:14 a.m., a figure enters the room. Female, slender, familiar posture. Tran's heart stopped. It was her. She watched herself walk in, sit in the chair. Then the screen went black. "That's not possible," Brooks whispered. "You've never been here." But Tran was pale, because she remembered the dream, a hallway of whispers, a chair, silence that pulsed, and a voice that said, "We've waited for you." She thought it was just stress. Now she wasn't sure. They chose her. Reeves called an hour later, voice shaking. "Isaiah, I've gone back over everything. The files, the photos, the names. There's a pattern I missed. All the 6B disappearances, they align by date. Every 7 years exactly, one major city is chosen. New York was 2019. Chicago is next. But it's not random who disappears. They're chosen before they move in. By the chair." The pre-selection. They reviewed Naomi's notebook again. One page had dates, names, and sketches of 6 chairs, each slightly different. One matched the one in New York. Another matched the chair in Chicago. But the final chair, the one in Troy, was blank, as if waiting to be filled. Tran turned to Brooks. "What if I sat in it already? What if they're not waiting for me to enter 6B? They're waiting for me to return." A message in the static. That night, Tran's apartment radio clicked on by itself. Static, then a voice. Not hers, not Naomi's. It was Arthur Kell. "You found the last room. You think you're stopping something? But you're the final verse, Jennifer. The network doesn't close without your silence." Then laughter. Not Kell's, not human. Multiple voices, whispering over each other, all saying the same phrase. "Give quiet, give quiet, give quiet." The flashback memories. Tran had forgotten came rushing back. Age 9, a summer spent in a foster home in Pennsylvania. A strange closet she used to sit in, a chair inside, whispers at night. She'd drawn it in crayon once, a triangle inside a circle. Her foster records, long buried, listed that home's address. The apartment? 6B. The revelation Tran had never moved into a 6B as an adult, but she'd been exposed as a child. She had already been chosen, and now she was at risk of completing a cycle she never knew had begun. "What happens when the last chair is filled?" Brooks asked. Tran didn't answer, because in her mind, she heard the echo again. "He will walk." July 15th, 2019, 4:44 a.m. Brooklyn, New York. Detective Tran awoke not to sound, but to its absence. Her apartment, usually humming with the ambient city noise of garbage trucks, sirens, and HVAC whirs, was dead silent. No street sounds, no neighbors above, no wind against the windows, just stillness. She stepped out of bed and heard her own voice whisper from inside the wall. "We are ready." The cities begin to hum across the country. Strange reports flooded in. In Atlanta, a woman in Unit 6B began speaking backwards in her sleep. In Minneapolis, 3 tenants filed noise complaints for constant whispers chanting coordinates. In San Francisco, a fire broke out in a 6B after all mirrors in the apartment shattered simultaneously, none from heat. Tran and Brooks tracked the timestamps. Each event occurred exactly 66 minutes apart. A pulse. A countdown. The pattern fully emerges. Reeves called from a safe house in Jersey. "I've matched them," he said breathlessly. "Every 6B-related incident from 1950 to now. They've all occurred along a spiral grid. geometrically perfect. A Fibonacci sequence rotated across the US map. The spiral centers at one address, the original 6B. The Seed apartment, Archer's birthplace. Tran nearly dropped the phone. She knew it. She'd seen it weeks earlier in a sealed NYPD file, a condemned brownstone in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. The Origin apartment. They drove through the night. Brooks, Tran, and Teller, who refused to stay behind. They reached the crumbling house by sunrise. Caution tape fluttered weakly around its porch. But the building stood tall, crooked, and waiting. Unit numbers long gone, but Naomi's sketches made it easy to identify which one had been 6B. A single window boarded up tight. The others open, as if the house was breathing. The room was still furnished. Inside 6B, a dusty chair, a cracked mirror, candles long melted down to crusted nubs, and on the wall, barely visible under flaking paint. When he walks, all noise ends. The ritual begins. Teller opened Naomi's notebook, flipping to the final marked page. The diagrams showed something odd. Each 6B wasn't just connected metaphorically. They were aligned acoustically. Resonant structures built to channel vibrational frequencies. When each chair was sat in, it triggered an echo, bouncing through the tunnel system. And when the last echo converged, it would create a still point, a moment where all noise in a radius would stop. A doorway, a birth canal for something not human. The still point. At 9:01 a.m., every sensor in Bethlehem registered a sound drop. No birds, no insects, no wind. Even cell signals flickered and died. And in 6B, the mirror cracked again, this time vertically. Tran approached it. From within, she saw a faint movement. Not a reflection, a form. Thin, looming, skin like old wax, no mouth, no eyes. It stepped forward, from behind the glass. The echo manifest. As it crossed into the room, time seemed to stagger. Teller collapsed. His eardrums burst. Brooks gasped for air, unable to move. Tran remained upright. The figure turned to her. It opened its arms, not physically, but like the room itself opened around her. The air thickened. The chair behind her pulled itself across the floor, aligning directly behind her. She heard every whisper she'd ever ignored flood her skull at once. Voices of the missing, of the cult, of the house itself. Sit. She felt herself move, almost. Then Naomi's voice, sharp and distant. Break the silence. It can't survive noise. The counter-ritual Tran remembered something Naomi had said. They feed on silence. That's what makes them solid. She reached into her bag and pulled out a portable speaker. Maximum volume. She hit play. A recording she made weeks earlier of the 6B tunnels. Rumbling, moaning, distorted static. She threw it at the mirror. It shattered completely. The figure screamed, a soundless implosion, and burst into dust, vanishing in the space between heartbeats. Collapsed atita, the building groaned. Not from damage, from waking up. Cracks split the walls. A wind rushed inward, not outward. They ran. The brownstone folded inward on itself, like a body curling into the fetal position. And then, silence again. But this time, permanent, what was left. Brooks, wounded but alive, watched from across the street. Teller didn't survive. Tran stood alone, holding the only thing left intact from inside 6B, the chair. A new choice back in New York, she sat in her precinct, alone in the interrogation room, reviewing every missing person connected to 6B. A message pinged her laptop, an encrypted video file. It autoplayed. A woman, blurry, eyes wide, sat in a room that looked eerily like her own. She whispered, "The network reset. One chair was destroyed, but one remains. You held it. Now you are it. Your body will be the new 6B. July 16th, 2019, Manhattan, New York. Jennifer Tran hadn't slept in 36 hours. Not because she couldn't, because she dared not. Every time she closed her eyes, the dreams came. But they weren't dreams in the traditional sense. They were rooms, hallways, wooden floors, wax-dripped candles, narrow tunnels that led nowhere and everywhere, and always, always, a single chair waiting in the center. She would wake up gasping, her ears ringing, and always her reflection would be watching her, but not mirroring her, just watching. The physical changes. Brooks noticed it first. At the precinct, Tran's voice occasionally echoed, but not in the normal way. Even when she whispered, the echo came first, before the sound left her mouth. "Your voice is backward," Brooks said, staring. She laughed it off, but when she returned home, her voice recorder confirmed it. When she played back her thoughts, the audio glitched and layered over itself, like the recorder had captured two versions of her. The doctors can't explain it. She checked herself in for an MRI at Mount Sinai. Her vitals, normal. Brain activity, elevated but not alarming. But the machine malfunctioned twice. Technicians described distorted resonance inside the scanner, almost as if the machine had picked up a second set of vocal vibrations. One tech fled the room after swearing he heard someone whisper, "She is the room now. Naomi calls." Naomi Klein's voice came through again, this time not in a dream or voicemail. She called Tran directly using an encrypted VoIP number. "You've become the vessel," Naomi said. "The chair didn't just choose you, it made you. You're the final echo. They can't rebuild 6B in a place anymore, so they've done it in you." Tran sat motionless. "So what happens now?" "Now," Naomi replied, "you stop pretending you're alone." The apartment begins to manifest. In the days that followed, things worsened. Her apartment's layout began to shift. Corners stretched longer. Hallways she never had seemed to appear at night, only to vanish by dawn. A door appeared on her bathroom wall, painted over, sealed, but clearly not decorative. One night she opened her fridge and found a cassette tape inside, labeled, "Jennifer, First Attempt." She didn't own a tape player, but somehow, her mouth began humming the distorted static from it without ever having played it. The whisper events spike across the US. Give Quiet began trending again, suddenly, aggressively. Hundreds of users posted videos of mysterious echoing voices in walls, dreams of rooms they'd never visited, and collective hallucinations involving a woman in a chair. Always the same woman. Always the same caption. She lives in 6B. But 6B is her now. Tran's photo appeared in forums, blurred screenshots of her walking down the street, captured whispers in subways after she passed by. The network hadn't just reset, it had evolved. It had gone mobile. Teller's backup files. Before his death, Owen Teller left behind a hard drive labeled failsafe. Tran opened it. Inside were transcripts and schematics, a theory. If the host becomes the 6B node, Teller had written, destruction of the physical unit will not be sufficient. You must destroy the root echo within them. This can only occur during the collapse cycle, a 44-hour window where the host's body attempts to reject the ritual. Symptoms include echo bleeding, pre-auditory distortion, reality lag. Tran checked her watch. She was 30 hours in. The collapse begins at 3:44 a.m. She awoke in her bed, floating, not physically, but perceptually. She could see herself from across the room. The walls bent around her. The ceiling melted into blackness, and the whispers weren't from outside anymore. They were inside her skull. You were always hollow. We only filled what was already echo. You are the chair. The ritual knife buried in Teller's files was one final instruction, a sketch of an ancient blade, serrated, jagged, covered in symbols. The caption read, "The mouth knife, used by the first 6 to sever the soul from the echo. The only weapon that can kill an inhabited 6B." Tran remembered seeing it. In Bethlehem, on the floor beside the first chair. She hadn't picked it up, but she knew where it would reappear. Back to Bethlehem, Tran returned to the ruins. Alone. The chair was gone, but in the ash, untouched, was the blade. As she lifted it, a wave of pressure dropped her to her knees. The ground throbbed. The wind screamed in silence, and in the remains of the mirror, her reflection blinked. The choice to sever the echo was to destroy everything connected to it. The network, the whispers, the rituals, but it could also sever herself, her memories, her identity, even her life. Brooks arrived, breathless. "You don't have to do this. There has to be another way," she shook her head. "I'm already furniture. It's time I stopped letting them sit in me." July 17th, 2019, 6:06 a.m., Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. It was quiet, not silence, the soft kind that settles after a snowfall or in a rural dawn. This was a void, an absence so complete it made the air feel heavy, thick. Detective Jennifer Tran stood alone in the remains of the original 6B apartment, the mouth knife in her hand, the echo in her chest. She had 14 hours left in the collapse cycle, and if she didn't use the knife before it closed, "I won't be Jennifer anymore," she whispered aloud. "I'll be the apartment." The final manifestation. At 6:16 a.m., it began. The dust in the room lifted, walls warped, a pulse echoed. Not sound, but a pressure, like a heartbeat wrapped in concrete. And in the center of the room, a figure began to coalesce. Skin pale, eyes missing, limbs too long. It was her reflection, the version of her that had appeared in mirrors, surveillance, dreams, the inhabited self, the echo host. It smiled, not with lips, but with intention. "We waited inside you. You carried us perfectly. Let us finish." Brooks's final plea. Brooks called. Tran answered mid-whisper. "Please don't do this," he begged. "We can pull this out."